Thank you for joining us today. So first of all, I want to thank Hi Studios for inviting me. And I actually had a lot of fun traveling with Lisa, Rob, and Sean just about 2 months ago across China as part of the ACE program. So if you are a small to medium-sized business and want to expand your business into China, I highly advise talking to the team and become part of the program. My name is Michael Tai. I'm the president of Interpret. We are an insight and consulting agency based in Los Angeles, mainly working in the entertainment and technology industry. A lot of video games, movies, LTE, VR, you name it. And today, the talk is not about me, though. It's about Mr. Gao and his practice and a lot of the knowledge he can share with the audience here. So if it's like a crosstalk or xiangsheng, if you're Chinese, I'm the Penggen today, and Mr. Gao is the Dougen. So before we get into the detailed topic, can you briefly introduce yourself, your background, and also the key focus practice areas of Yuanhe?
Okay, thank you, Michael. And ladies and gentlemen, my name is Yang Gao, a partner from Yuanhe Partners, having law offices in Beijing, Dalian, and New York City. Ever since our establishment, we have been dedicated in helping our clients in different legal styles like intellectual properties, M&A, and corporate laws, capital markets, litigations, and real properties. And now I think with more than 70 professionals and our international background, we are always ready to help our clients in any international structure or business plans between US and China. And yeah.
Thank you, and I really like your WeChat handle, the silence of the lambs. Myself, a big fan of Jodie Foster. Before we get into the questions, I want to ask the audience here, how many of you here have business dealings with China? Okay, and how many of you actually have investors on your board or as part of your company if you're a US company? Okay, and I assume there are a few Chinese individuals who are investing in the US as well. And typically, I know you guys want to keep a low profile, so I don't want you to raise your hand. And the last panel was very strategic, but this one is going to be a lot more tactical. It's going to give you a lot of tips on how you can operate across the border. So my first question is, if I were a Chinese citizen or a Chinese company that's interested in investing in a company in the US, can I just do that? Are there a lot of like policies and legal restrictions that I need to be aware of?
Yeah, good question. Actually, it's like a sum and jump from the business side to the legal issue. Actually, it's really exciting to know there are more and more cross-border investment business between US and China, not only from US to China, but more and more Chinese people and companies who like to hold American companies' shares or assets. Well, having said so, know that lawyers sometimes like to be the deal killers, but sometimes it's true that more business and opportunities may lead to more legal issues and risks. With more and more Chinese going abroad and investing offshore, Chinese laws have become more and more relevant in this area. And actually, there's a very essential question about the ownership. So how a Chinese individual citizen or company can legally hold an offshore unlisted company's shares according to Chinese laws? I know this question is kind of surprising to most Americans, but also as well as Chinese. But it really does make sense under Chinese laws.
And what are those specific Chinese laws that we need to be aware of?
Okay, I think actually holding shares offshore is a heavily regulated area in China, according to Chinese laws. Actually, it's also subject to multiple governmental departments' approval, including our foreign currency controller, the State Administration of Foreign Currency, and also known as SAFE, and also the Ministry of Commerce, also known as MOFCOM, and also National Development and Reform Committee, also known as NDRC. Probably some of you here may have heard about these departments. Actually, all these authorities, they promulgated a number of rules and regulations on this area, and all boil down to a conclusion that actually there are only two ways for a Chinese investor to hold and unlist the company shares offshore. One is the direct offshore investment approval. The other is what we call the number 37 registration under a small red chip structure. Yep.
What are the kind of the key differences between the two? If I'm a Chinese investor, which one should I, or do I need to actually obey both of them?
Okay, let's talk more in detail about two scenarios one by one. For the first scenario, the direct offshore investment approval, actually it is a pretty straightforward one. Okay, the Chinese investor applied to the three departments as mentioned, the NDRC, the MOFCOM, and the SAFE. And the deal structure is relatively simpler. You just establish or buy companies offshore as it is proved. And although the deal structure seems to be relatively simpler, but actually this area is deeply policy oriented, which means the three departments their approval standards for this matter can fluctuate with changing policy. For example, ever since 2017, we've seen an obvious drop in the number of Chinese investors and the investment amount from China offshore because the authorities have adopted much higher approval standards. Now they not only check, the target offshore closely, but also they strictly review the qualification of the Chinese investor back in China to do so. Actually, we think this policy can last for quite a period of time in the future. This is the first scenario. And the second scenario, that is what we call the number 37 registration under small red chip structure. I know this name is long, sounds complicated and unfamiliar to most of you here, but actually it's a fact that almost all the Chinese internet companies in the private sector listed in New York or Hong Kong have adopted this structure actually. The structure is more complicated, but actually, the pro authorities, the policy and the proving standards has stayed stable for years. For this structure, if you want to have a small red chip structure, you need to set up several companies over several jurisdictions, not only the U.S. and China, but also the jurisdictions like BVI, British Virgin Islands, and the Cayman Islands to finish one. And once you get that number 37 registration completed, you kind of get like a legal ID for the Chinese investor to do the offshore investment. So I think that's the basic difference between the two. So in all, I think no matter how many layers between the Chinese investor and the ultimate target, actually the Chinese investor shall fall into one of two scenarios to legalize this offshore investment.
That's interesting. So it sounds like number 37 is more geared towards bigger companies because it sounds fairly complicated and will be pretty resource intensive. And then if I'm more like a smaller scale investor or like an individual investor, I should go with the first route, right? Is that?
Well, actually, for the first scenario, the Chinese authorities require the Chinese investor to be an entity rather than an individual. So you have to form a Chinese company or entity, like partnership, kind of things like that, to establish first in China, and then use that Chinese entity to be the applicant for this offshore investment.
Got it. Understood. Thanks for that clarification. And do you have to, those three government bodies you want to apply for in the first scenario, do you need to go through the central government agency or are there local government agencies that can help you do that? If, for instance, you are from Sichuan or Chengdu or one of the cities, you need to go all the way to the central government.
Well, that's a good question. Actually, it depends on how many money you're going to invest offshore. Okay, it's like over 100 million renminbi, I think, probably go to the central. And if it's just below that amount, so you just stay with the provincial level. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
And well, that's really good to know because one thing I discovered, even though I was Chinese, but I haven't worked in China for almost 20 years. Okay. So when I went back to China, one big discovery or rediscovery was how complex the Chinese government structure is and how many agencies there are that you need to talk to. So it sounds like your firm will help companies navigate the complex government landscape.
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course we're based in Beijing, but people doing this kind of legal services will have connections and liaison with all levels of government in China.
And of course, nobody is above the law until you are Donald Trump. Let's say I was a Chinese guy and I did some investment deals already in the U.S. and I wasn't aware of all these laws and policies. I'm a little bit naive. What happens? What can I do now to make sure I'm not in prison or something?
Okay, let's just talk about this from a Chinese law perspective. And it's pretty much like so what question. So what will the legal result if one failed to comply with those rules? Of course, from Chinese law perspective. And I think I better analyze this from the offshore perspective because I think it's more relevant here, this American audience here. I think traditionally there were three situations. Well, the first one is an mergers and acquisition situation where the target offshore trying to introduce new investors or being sold to another party. In this situation, I think according to our experience, the investors or the opposite parties will definitely ask the company or the controller of the company to make representations and warranties on the lawfulness of the ownership subject to any applicable laws. And more importantly, I think that the investors and the opposite party may also carry out a legal due diligence investigation on the company. And I think in that case, probably this issue will be exposed to an outsider. Okay, and the second situation is actually pretty similar to the first one, where the target offshore is pursuing an IPO in one of the mature securities market in the world, like New York or Hong Kong. Well, in this situation, it's the regulators, securities regulators, that will ask the same question to the company, and at that moment, you either choose to disclose it and cure the issue, or you probably have a TD5 issue under the American law. Well, the third scenario, I think the third situation is I can call it the backslip investment situation where target offshore try to invest back to China, either establish company or buy a subsidiary here. And the Chinese subsidiary, as a foreign investment company, is required by Chinese law to report to the bank where it opens its bank account and the safe about whether it has a Chinese investor at the top layer offshore. So at that moment, again, you've got a choice between either lie to the Chinese government or you solve the issue at that moment. And in all the situations, according to our experience, that if you try to make out this loophole when you have to, it costs much more than you solve that from the very beginning. So please be an early bird in solving this problem.
So lying to the government in China is not a good option, sounds like.
I don't think it's good either to any government.
Again, based on what you're describing, sounds like it applies to bigger companies, more like public listed companies. What if it's a Chinese company that's just trying to invest in a company of our size, like 30 people or so, and are they going to follow pretty much the same laws? And because if they wanted to invest in us, we don't know what the Chinese investors need to go through ourselves, so we won't be able to give them any advice. So they need to know what they're doing. But from a legal perspective, are they going through pretty much the same process?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Well, actually, I just want to add one idea besides what I've just talked about. Just to make sure and ask your Chinese investor to double check this, whether it has complied with all the requirement of procedure and filing in this area. Sometimes it is, especially in some very special situation like the investor is a state-owned company, okay, there are more regulations on the state-owned assets, offshore investments. So just let them double check that. They must have lawyers in that area, I think, because all this approval, even if they choose the first scenario, okay, there are a lot of procedures on that. So they have to have a Chinese legal counsel.
Got it. So that's the China side of the story. What about the U.S.? I assume there are laws here that address like foreign investment from China. Does your practice also advise on those U.S. laws, or it's mostly the Chinese laws?
Yes, we have a New York office, and also we have a lot of cooperative partners here. So I think this is not a problem if the Chinese member from either side, whether it's a Chinese investor or it's a target offshore here in the United States. I think from both ends we can help a lot on that.
Got it. And the next question is very kind of interesting to me personally because our business in China has been booming because a lot of our international clients like Activision, Riot, Ubisoft, they all want to understand the Chinese market, the consumer behavior there. So I've been going to China at least once a month, and I'm going next week for my 10th trip this year.
Right.
So we're thinking about setting up an office in China, so kind of the reverse. Do you guys provide service to companies like us as well on the other side?
Yes, of course. Good to hear that. Actually, this practice is what we call the foreign direct investment in China. And as China's open policy has been stable actually for 40 years, and this legal practice has also been developed for almost the same long. So it has become a pretty mature one. And now it is more about a combined and preventive service for our clients. For example, any of you here or your company want to establish or purchase a Chinese company in China, and you better ask your Chinese legal counsel to do a research on all the potential IP and intellectual property or litigation, risks. And also there are a bunch of other, compliance issues like in labor, tax, and real properties, and environmental protection, and also finance. So in all these areas, your Chinese legal counsel should be prepared, to provide the legal service comprehensively.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time, so last question, since we're at the entertainment event. Like, I know you guys are sponsoring, so you probably have a booth outside, but can you quickly introduce, like, what are some of the entertainment-specific services you offer?
Well, actually, from Chinese side, in Chinese market, that have a lot of companies established by the Chinese movie stars, in their daily operation like IT, intellectual property, which is the most important thing for them, and also their investment in China. And of course, we have this kind not only the legal service but also the social resources. So if anything here is interested in this, we can help to bridge.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank
it's
you.
a very informative session for myself, and hopefully the audience got some interesting insights as well. I think